Hello and welcome to my channel today. Thank you for joining me. I am going to be using some HunkyDory products that I got sent recently to make a card using some embossing powder to create a resist. I started by using this Ink Me card from HunkyDory with the Floral Favourites stamp set. I started by using my anti-static bag to make sure that no stray flecks of powder would get in places they shouldn't do. I'm using my Versamark ink pad, which you can see isn't as clean as it originally was, and I'm using that on my block on my stamp, which is laid flat on the table as I ink it up, and then I am stamping my very smooth card before covering it with white embossing powder. Now, there isn't really much you can see at this point because obviously it was clear ink and then it's white powder, but once it's heated you'll be able to see the gloss of the embossing powder, which is what I want to be able to create the resist. I'm using a few different sized flowers from the Floral Favourites set. They are really sweet flowers. They are more of a stylized style rather than a realistic style, which is what I really like. You also on the stamp set get some leaves and you get 4 sentiments, one of which is a straightforward happy birthday, but the other 3 are stamps that you could use for many different occasions. When I lift it, I'm just looking to see where there are gaps, because obviously it's quite tricky to see the white on white, so I have to get the light to shine on it so I can see. Sometimes I'm flicking the back to get rid of some of the extra particles as well, and I'm now just using a dry paintbrush to brush off any extra flecks that I've gotten where they shouldn't be. Now I'm heating with my heat tool, and I hold the card at an angle so that I can see as the light shines off of it as the powder melts and turns glossy, and as soon as it starts to turn glossy I move on to the next section so as not to overheat the powder, which can make it go very dull and sort of sink into the card. I'm now using the Prism ink pads, which are dye based inks, along with my HunkyDory blending tools. Now, I know that blending is something that a lot of people struggle with, so the way that I do it is I make sure that the ink is really blended into the foam before I even put it onto my card. That's why you'll see I put a bit onto the blending foam and then I'm squashing it into my mat and really sort of turning it round. Then I start off of the piece of card so that I'm not going to get a blob straight onto my my card straight away. I go in circular motions and I start off a bit lighter and then build up the colour, because you can always add more to it but you can't take it away once it's on there. Also, sometimes when you're inking, you might be like I do sometimes, just sticking your fingers onto the rest of your card, and especially if you've got a dye based ink like this, you can easily start lifting it off with your fingerprints. So that's why I'm using a little bit of kitchen roll to protect the ink that I've already laid down. I decided to add a bit more blue, and the colours that I've used here are Mauve Moment, Camellia Pink and Blue Lagoon. And now I'm just wiping away where the ink was on the embossing. Because these are water reactive inks, you can then splash them with some water, lift the water and get that sort of distressed or water spotted look, which I really like. I wanted to add some of the really tiny flowers that are in the set as well, and I used the same inks that I'd used on the background to do this. I should say as well that I had cut my piece of card, which in the card block that I have is 8 inches by 8 inches, and I'd cut it down to a 6.5 inch square. Now taking the prism powders from set 2, and I'm using them on a piece of watercolour cardstock this time, not the Ink Me, because this is specifically designed to take water and the Ink Me card is more for stamping and for inks rather than pigment powders. I'm using set 2 as I said, and the colours in this are Purple Panache, Pearly Pink and Sparkling Sapphire, which I'd chosen the prism ink pads that I used to specifically match these colours. I always start off with less powder than I think I'm going to need, because again you can always add a bit more, but if you start off by adding too much you end up with a piece of card that's too saturated with the colours. I'm now drying it off. If you want a better, more pigmented piece of card, it's best to actually leave them to dry on their own. I'm really impatient. I always, or almost always, dry my paints and inks with a heat tool, but for the best results you really should leave them to dry naturally. Making sure that I put the lids on so I didn't want to accidentally spill any of my powder. I'm now using the largest 2 flowers. No, I'm not. I'm using the largest 1 flower to stamp onto my background. I'm looking at what I've created and deciding which would make the best colours for my flower. Because they're dye-based inks, they just come off really easily just with a little spritz of water and a cloth. Now I'm only going to show you cutting out 1 flower because I didn't think you'd want to sit and watch me cut out 3, but I left this part in really just to show you that these flowers in this set are fairly straightforward to cut out. They're not too fiddly, they're sort of quite good shapes to cut. I have also made a blog post using about how I use the products in this video and giving you a little bit more info about how I found the products, more information about the actual products and what I thought of them. There will be a link to that in the description box underneath the video. Once I'd made my flowers, I decided that the actual card base that I made was a bit big for the focal points, so I cut it down to I think it was 4 3/4 inch square. However, the bits that I cut off, if you go to my blog post you'll see what I actually did with those. I'm now adding some of the Diamond Sparkle glitter gems to the centres of the flowers and just giving them a little bit of shape with my fingers so that they look a bit more flower-like rather than just flat. And I also stamped the birthday wishes sentiment from the same set onto another piece of the pigment powder background. I've raised up the sentiment with some foam as well, just because I like a little bit of extra dimension on the front of my cards. And I then decided to add some extra gems, and this is from the monochrome set, which I like because it's got a mixture of different types of silvers rather than just a silver gemstone on there. And here are some close-up shots of my finished card. Thank you very much for watching. There are links underneath the video to HunkyDory, so if you want to look at any of the products, and also to my social media. Thanks for watching, and if you did enjoy the video please do like and subscribe, it makes a real difference. Thank you.